Hello. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Tonight's shir was dedicated to by my dear friend Ashkan Mordechai Tabibna. This is in honor of his mother, for Refuah Shalema, for his mom, Leah Ava Bat Heshmat, for Refuah Shalema. You should be in her full health and get all better, perfectly better. She should return even better than she was before. Remember her birthday party. She's a very special woman. May Hashem bench her in good health and much bracha to you and your family for all that you did, all that you want. Thank you. Okay, I have to leave soon. I just need to take a flight over to New York. So I know I sometimes get carried away and I lose things, but I have to make sure that I keep my eye on the clock when I run after the airport. Okay, and so my head is a little bit famished, but let's see what we can pull off. Just have a wedding in New York. Oh, I'd like to mention also a big mazel tov to Beryl Politico and his Kala Chana, I don't know their last name. May they build the binyan on the yad, a beautiful home, a lot of mazel, a lot of bracha. Big mazel tov to the chassid's parents, the Kala's parents, the chassid's parents that I know. Montel. And Shula Politico. Big mazel tov. Lots of nachas from them and from all the others. Okay, ready to go. So what's on everybody's mind? Obviously, today is the election day, November 3rd. It's a big day. It's a big day because it's going to decide a lot. The future of the direction of the world. You go outside, you hear from everybody. This is the most important election in their lifetime. But I don't look at this from a political point of view. I'm looking at this very much from the realms of spirit, from the spiritual. Maybe I'm a little different than most other rabbis, and maybe some other rabbis, and there are definitely some rabbis are saying, I'm generally more tuned in, or I live a little bit more in the mystical side of things, and that's where I like to find my energy and the energy of what I'm saying and thinking and speaking about. To me, this seems like a culmination tomorrow of a major cosmic battle. I don't know if it's the culmination, but it's definitely, let's hope it's the culmination, not just another phase. Let's hope it's the culmination and the grand finale, if we can say, of this final battle. Seems to be this massive battle regarding Mashiach. That's the way I see it. I know that not everybody has the same political views or the same ideas. Again, I'm not coming to this from political. I'm leaning towards conservative views over liberal views. Although, in a lot of Torah elements, the way we look at life, we tend to be more conservative. Not completely. Many qualities of liberalism are rooted in Torah. And like the previous Chabad Rebbe said when they asked him which thing is the truth, they were talking about in his days there was huge, major disputes going on in the different factions that were all rivaling one with each other, with this and this, and all different groups there in Russia and so forth. And people couldn't make up their minds. There was like such so many different political, such turmoil. And the Friedrich Rebbe then said that, and they asked him, what is the Torah view? And he said that in each one of these groups, or each one of these isms, if you can call them, there's a little bit of truth. The Torah is the truth of all these together. So there's a certain sensitivity and kindness and so on and so forth that at least is certain, at least spoken of in the left and so on and so forth, that that has value, a lot of values. I'm not talking from a political point of view at all. I'm looking at this completely from, as I spoke in so many classes, from a purely spiritual place, in the sense that, there is, from what I know from Torah and what I know from the Lubavitcher Rebbe particularly, is that we're living in the days of Mashiach. That means that the world now has to be, Mashiach is unfolding. The redemption of the Jewish people is unfolding. Part of that redemption has to be that the Jewish people return to the land of Israel and take possession of the land of Israel. And we build a temple. That has to happen. Now, of course, that final project, the building of the temple, was done by Mashiach himself. However, the process of seeing to it, it seems like from what is discussed in many books, and also particularly in the Rebbe's talks, in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's talks, is that it's going to be some kind of a process that the world is going to participate in. I mean, it's not going to be fireworks from the sky, but it's going to be some kind of a process where the elements of who were originally of the unholy are going to participate and become an alliance to holiness. The Rebbe spoke about that a lot. The Rebbe even spoke about the forces of Esau, particularly spoke about Esau. It says in Sfarim regarding Yisroel as well, Yisroel does true. So when you're looking at a world today and you're seeing, what seems to be, which force in the world seems to be routing or rooting for the strengthening of the Jewish presence in the land of Israel, and which force, God forbid, is on the other side, trying to bring a political resolution to all of this, but one that gives far too much power to the Palestinian people that want to claim Jerusalem as theirs. I'm not claiming to come to this from a purely humanistic or whatever. That's not my business over here. I'm very comfortable with the fact that God promised the land of Israel to the Jewish people, and therefore I'm very proud to say that this is the land that's going to be ours, to belong to Jews. I'm not getting into the politics if the Palestinians were there, they weren't there. It's all irrelevant. That might sound religiously fanatic, but that's still a promise of God if you believe in the Torah, and that's the way it's got to be. That's the way it's going to be. It might be that the Palestinians never had a claim to that land, and the whole thing is a fabrication. But I'll leave that to political experts. I'm looking at this completely from the perspective that when Mashiach comes, the land of Israel has to be firmly in the hands of the Jewish people, temple has to be built, and so on and so forth. And we have to make sure that Israel and Jewish people are not under the threat, God forbid, of a nuclear holocaust. Those are just a few of the ideas. There's another element that Mashiach's world also involves a recognition of God and a certain sense of a godly morality. And I spoke about this 2 weeks ago already. And that too has to be understood, it has to be taken into consideration. And that is that if Mashiach means that God is comfortable in this world, that means God is taken seriously. The basics of a godly morality. God did instruct us on marriage. God wants a man to marry a woman, and definitely doesn't like the idea of everybody choosing their gender. That's not a godly world. And God also cares very much for the preservation of life and to the preservation of unborn life as well. We need to be very, very, very cautious with and do whatever we can to preserve the lives of everyone, including unborn children. So when looking at the world, and you're looking at which group and who is calling for what, you see clearly what this clash is all about. Those that are sadly today's days on the left, in this election represented by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, is in terms of Israel, they're going to reconnect to after Donald Trump had shut down the Palestinian terrorist organization, shut them out, kicked them out of Washington, and defunded them and kind of weakened them. It's unbelievable how weak, generally, has weakened terrorism in the world. If you think about how many terrorist attacks happened in Israel in the last couple of years compared to what was going on during the Obama years, it's mind-boggling how tiny and insignificant it is, because he weakened it, and generally weakened it. And the elimination of ISIS, the weakening of everything that stood against Israel, and the weakening of Iran in this unbelievable way by killing Soleimani and by choking them financially. It's incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. And as I mentioned, it's so unexpected. But also religious rights and a certain recognition of a God-given morality and acknowledging of God, and not completely selling out just to science. Understanding, yes, science, but there is a master of the universe who takes precedence over science. Or do we worship science? Do we worship just what man understands, and God becomes a completely non-factor? I think that's the way I see it, is the root of this election. So if we're rooting for God, we're rooting for Israel, and obviously we're rooting for Mashiach. If that's the case, I would like to take a look at the Torah portion that we're going to read tomorrow. And again, I'm perfectly fine with anybody that argues with me and has different opinions. That's fine. I'm not telling you must. It doesn't make a difference if I tell you or not. I'm not an authority that you have to listen to. I'm just saying what my opinion is, okay? So everybody, vote your conscience and vote your hearts and vote your mind. Vote what you believe is right and true. But go vote, yeah. In any case, because that's the power that Hashem has given us, this free country. So we have to exercise it. I do want to take a look at this week's Parsha and see if perhaps there could be any clues, particularly in the portion of the Parsha that is dealing with tomorrow's portion. Because we know the Parsha is divided in what you read for Sunday or Monday, 7 aliyahs corresponding to the 7 days of the week. We read it on Shabbos, but every week there's a custom to read the Chumash of the day. So tomorrow's Chumash, which is election day, is an interesting story. It's the story of the two angels that are going to Sodom. They were sent to the 5 cities, Sodom and Amorah, to turn it over. That was not such a. When I looked about a few months ago or 2 months ago, when I looked up election day, what Chumash we're going to learn, I didn't like it. Talking about a destruction of a city, a corrupted city. Just like tomorrow is also, well, not tomorrow, the next day is also the beginning of a flood. So these were, in terms of the calendar year, so these are two things that, at first glance, I wasn't too excited when I found this out to be the Torah portion for election day. Yet, with deeper inspection, it seems like we have very good news. It seems like we have very good news to share. So, I first want to say an interesting thing that occurred to me last week. I spoke about it in Shul last Shabbos, is that, last week in the Torah portion we have already a story of Avram. Oh, and one more thing. So you got the gods. You don't have the destruction of Sodom. That happens the next day. It's going to be on Wednesday. That's going to be studied on Wednesday. The portion. You have the extraction. The God sends the angels to extract Lot. Lot and his 2 daughters are saved from the city, and I think that's very crucial. I think that's very telling, and it's very related to. Hopefully tomorrow's elections. Okay. So to get this, we find that Avram Avinu, our forefather Abraham, is very strongly connected to this individual by the name of Lot. Lot is his nephew. Now Lot ain't no big tzaddik. Okay? He's not such a righteous person. But yet Avram is very, very close to him. He defends him, he risks his life. In last week's Torah portion, Parshas Lech Lecha, we learned already that Avram and Lot had this argument, and they separated. And Avram went to Lot went off and he moved away. They were both very wealthy because he came out of Egypt. He got a lot of wealth. And then there was some kind of they didn't get along with each other. They had a conflict, and Avram tells Lot, let's separate. That means and Rashi says he was a wicked person. As long as the wicked person was with him, God didn't want to speak with Avram. So this was, he's not a good guy. Yet, we find that later the Torah relates a story how there was this massive coalition of armies that came together to fight a war. The 4 kings came to fight against the 5 kings. And when the 4 kings came, and after they finished it, and they defeated the 5 kings, which those were the kings of Sodom, Lot was taken into captivity. And we find that Avram goes to fight on behalf of the 5 kings against the 4 kings. The champions of the war, the 4 beat the 5. They were coming home marching to victory. And then Avram, a single man with just his one servant, goes out to battle them. Or he took 318 men, or different understanding of what exactly happened. But 318 men, even if they were 318 men, to go fight these armies of probably tens of thousands of soldiers. It's amazing. And yet Avram defeated them. He chased them, defeated them, and he managed to get all the captivity and all the spoils. He took it all back. Incredible. So it's interesting when the Torah relates that story. So in the beginning, Rashi tells us that it lists the names of the 4 kings, it lists the names of the 5 kings. So when it lists the names of the 4 kings, it mentions the first one, his name is Amraphel, and Rashi says that Amraphel is Nimrod. That's Nimrod. Okay, that's been already, an enemy of Abraham, of Avram for a long time. He was the one who threw him into the furnace of fire, wanted to kill him because he offended the idols. Fine. But then the rest of the names, Rashi doesn't explain anything about them. When it comes to the 5 kings, you can look at Rashi. Rashi explains every name, how these names are wicked names. They're wicked names because they're obviously the carriers of those names were wicked people. Keep a whole thing about how these people were wicked. Fine. So it's strange to me when I was reading it because Rashi did not say regarding the 4 kings that they were wicked. So it seems that maybe it's quite possible that the 4 kings were not as wicked as the 5 kings. Later you see that God spills his wrath on these very 5 kings that Avram went to fight for in last week's Torah portion. A couple of years later, God has to wipe them off the map, literally destroy them. The symbol of a wicked society is Sodom and Gomorrah. They were wicked people. Yet Avram goes and fights for them. And from Rashi, it seems to imply that on personal virtue, these people are of a much greater personal flaws than the other 4 kings. Yet Avram defends the 5 and he fights the 4. I find that kind of strange. So I think that's very telling. And that's just an introduction to what we're going to talk about today. I think that's very telling because a lot of people are not comfortable with the choice. Because a lot of people don't like the personality of President Trump. They really don't. And they feel that it's harsh, crash. It's just, and again, it's not the... And yet, he's done amazing things. He's done amazing, amazing things for the Jewish people. I think he's done amazing things in general for the world. And I believe that the reason that he has this nature is this is the only thing that would enable him to do what he needs to do, and that is to be a klipa buster, to shatter and break elements that need to be shattered. If you're a very sweet human being, or very, what might call presidential human being, you couldn't do it. So he has to be ferocious. He has to have incredible chutzpah to be able to do what he needs to do. But even if you're going to say, you prefer a president that's more of a refined character, and even if you're going to say, okay, after all the stuff that's been coming out on his rival, with all the stuff that has been going on, which the media doesn't want to touch, to take a look what kind of stuff we've been Again, I'm not here judging all of this because nothing has been proven yet to be fully true unless it's investigated. But there is an FBI investigation. So, to make the other fellow a big tzaddik, and again, I don't think that's correct either. But I'm saying even if that would be true, even if we would say that Biden is a sweetheart and Harris is just this wonderful people, really, really, really nice, lovable people, and even if you're going to argue and say that Trump is a nasty guy, even if you would, and I don't believe that either. Okay, I'm not again, but I'm saying it's interesting that Rashi points out that the 5 kings are very wicked, yet Avram Avinu goes to defend. Why does Avram go to defend? Why does he join the wicked team against the good guys? Not the good guys, I'm going to say they're the good guys, but the lesser of the evil. And the answer is because these 5, they might be personally have their issues and they might have their problems, but they're not interfering with the divine agenda. They're not fighting God. They got their problems. They're misbehaving. They're having, they're having affairs. They're not in their moral personal marriages. They might not be tzaddikim. They might not be that nice. They maybe, they maybe in some, there's corruption going on. Okay, fine. Let's take that. They're not the holies. But they're not. Now, every person's life interferes with the greater, and you should be living at all counts. I'm not saying there is one act in the world that doesn't impact the world, and I don't mean that. I mean to say that in the general picture, there are those that are bent and are directly interfering, meaning fighting something godly. Nimrod was here to destroy Abraham, Avram. God's plan for the world was through Avram. Nimrod hated Avram. Or more particularly, he wasn't so much after Avram, he was after Avram's offspring. Nimrod means rebel against God. Avram means the implementation of God's kingdom, primarily through his grandson, great-great-grandson, Mashiach. Mashiach is the opposite of rebellion against God. Mashiach will reign in all of humanity to serve God. So Nimrod, who's like rebelling against God, is obviously going to go and want to destroy Mashiach. And because he wants to destroy Mashiach, he's after a man called Lot. Because Lot is the forebearer of Mashiach. Because Lot's grandson is Ammon and Moab. Eventually it's going to be Ruth, who's the great-great-grandmother of King David. That's seed. And it seems like whether consciously or subconsciously, the forces of Klippa know that. And therefore they want to snuff it out. They want to destroy it, they want to fight it, they want to eliminate it before it even has a chance to release its power in the world. They want to abort it. They want to do a Mashiach abortion. That's what they want to do. And that's why these 4 kings came to fight against Lot. Here they're messing with God's inner interest. And that's what counts. So Avram is going to go team up with the most wicked of people because they're not fighting God. They're not fighting God's agenda of Mashiach. Those 4 kings were fighting Mashiach. So if we need a little clarification for what I think is the way we vote in this election, is we wonder who is fighting Mashiach. And I think it's very clear. The reestablishment of bringing back the Palestinians to the table, bringing back the Oslo approach, bringing back the 2-state solution, bringing back the splitting of Jerusalem. It's not just one of the issues. This is the issue of all issues. This is the interference with God's plan of a temple, of a temple on the Temple Mount. This is not allowing Mashiach to come, especially right now when it's the time for redemption to happen. And that's why our case is closed. There's nothing more to talk about. Nothing else is important in my mind. Okay? Even if it's just this matter, this is it. So now let's take a look at this Parsha and let's see how this expresses itself in this week's Torah portion with the story of Lot. So you have an interesting thing. We find that God is very angry at Sodom and he wants to wipe out all of Sodom, those 5 cities, because they're very wicked people. And we find that Avram Avinu steps up, and that's not in tomorrow's Chumash, again, the Chumash relating to the day of the election, but that is in today's Chumash. So Avram steps up, and he is outright going to wrestle with God. He stands up and he's defending them. And the way he speaks to Hashem is shocking. He's literally acting as an advocate, but the way he says, it's Chalila L'cha, it's not befitting for you, God, to kill the righteous together with the wicked. Can't do that. Hashayfik Kol Haaretz, the judge of the entire world, is not going to do a correct judgment. And for who is he arguing? For who is he arguing? For the wicked people of Sodom. So there's a lot of lessons to learn from here. But it's interesting because you can't say that Avram is just a defender of every human being and fights for every human. You could say that, but because you see that when he went to fight against the 4 kings, Avram Avinu spilled blood. He killed people. He was worried when he came back. That's why it says that Shem came out to greet him and blessed him and told him, I don't know how to hold it against you that you killed my ancestors, my grandchildren. He killed lots of people. Must have killed thousands of people. Because when it's needed, it's necessary in that time. War, fine. But suddenly over here, for these wicked of the wicked, he's standing up and he's fighting like... So there's a lot of answers to this. But I want to focus particularly on one. Today's class, in general, is going to be a little more homiletical, meaning a little bit less, not so much I'll be pshat. I'm not saying that I'm explaining this all on simple explanation, but rather a little bit more... So it says in Svarim, okay? I discussed this a lot. I used to give a class which I should really reinstate. It was called Mashiach Matters. And we went through many, many, many stories in the Torah and to find the Mashiach spark. So in those classes, when I got to this story, I discussed it at great length, and now I'm just doing a little of a synopsis and a little picking on certain things which I think is stunningly relating to tomorrow. And perhaps we will find over here signs that there's going to be, and again, I have no idea what the outcome is going to come. I pray and I hope. I have my trust and my hope. But I don't know. It can go. Only God knows. But I hope Hashem should help. In any case, what does the Torah say? Oh, so we're saying, why is Avram putting up such a fight? So, and it's interesting, he negotiates. What does he negotiate? He negotiates and he says, maybe there's 50 tzaddikim, 50 righteous people. Then he says, maybe there's 45. Then he says 40. Then 30, then 20, then 10. Those are the numbers. So generally he sticks to tens. One place by 45, he fights for 45. Now you see where I'm going with this. Maybe there's 50. Maybe there's 45. The only number that's not the even number. Maybe there's 45. Maybe there's 40. Maybe there's 30. Maybe there's 20. So what's significant with these numbers? Why is he using this amount? So here's the thing. What Avram really was concerned was not so much for all the people of Sodom. Avram Avinu knew Avram was really davening for the saving of Lot. But he couldn't just justify it, because Lot was wicked. Then he couldn't say to God, save Lot because he's my nephew. And the rest are not God's creations, they're God's creations. Just because he's my nephew, that's when he should be saved, and what's with everybody else. The real reason why Avram was not going to allow the destruction of Lot wasn't just because Lot was his nephew, but rather because the spark of Mashiach was in Lot. The Midrash tells us. The Pasuk says, later in the Parsha it says, that he went and it says in Pasuk Tezvav, verse 15, it says, and the Malachim Talot, go take your wife, and your 2 daughters, and in tzadis that are to be found. So the Midrash on the word hanimtzaot, that are to be found, says, who is found? To be found in the city? They're living there. What do you mean to be found? As if they just popped in there. No. God says, I found someone there. I found a spark that can't be destroyed. And who's that spark? That's the spark of David HaMelech. That's the spark of Mashiach. David Malka Mashiach. Mashiach Tzidkenu, King David. The verse says, Matzasi David Avdi. I found David, my servant. So when Avram Avinu was laying himself on the line to pray, is because he does not want, God forbid, the destruction of the spark, which is the whole power of Mashiach. And even though that spark is right now buried in an unholy place, but still, you can't kill and destroy something and along with the destruction of the evil, you're going to destroy the spark, which means you're going to destroy the whole future of the world's redemption. Now, doesn't God know that on his own? God knows that on his own. But God gives it over to tzaddikim to run the affairs of this world, which means to persuade him and to direct him. That's the way it is. So Avram Avinu needs to demand this and ask this. And that's why it's interesting, it's hinted to when Avram is praying, it says that Avram he's still Omeid Sham, right when he begins his prayer. Avram Oidenu Omeid Lifnei Hashem. Avram is still standing in front of God. So it says in Sfarim, now I collected this from a bunch of books. Most of them are written in this sefer, this way where I took it from Yalkut Mashiach Geula. It's a great compilation of writings from different Sfarim. And it basically collects anywhere it's written about Mashiach on the Parsha, it mentions it. A really good book written by, there's one on each set of Parshas, right? It's compiled by Rabbi Dubov. In any case, so on the words Oidenu Omeid, that Avram is still standing there, that means Avram took a stand. The word Omeid is Rosh Hashanah, which means it's the acronym of the word Mem Dalet Ayin Matzasi David Avdi. I found David my servant. So Avram is still standing over there because he's going to make a stand for what it says Matzasi. God says, I have found David my servant. So we have to rescue David, who's in Lot, who's in Sodom. That will also explain when Avram Avinu is arguing the numbers, why he argues this number. If you take all these numbers together, you take, as we said earlier, 50, 45 is 95. Okay, 50 and 45 is 95. Then you have 40, 30, 20, and 10. So that equals 100. 40 and 30 is 70, 20 and 10 is 30, is 100. So together you have 195. That's Gematria HaKetz, the end. We know Bikesh Yaakov Legalos Es HaKetz. Yaakov wanted to reveal the Ketz. Ketz is Mashiach. HaKetz, that's what it's called. The Ketz. Gematria 195. So when Avram Avinu was davening for these numbers, it's because he's davening for HaKetz, for the coming of Mashiach. Another remez is brought, again, by one of the great tzaddikim. I don't remember everybody's name for this because it was a compilation from a whole bunch of books. So where he says if you can divide it as follows. The first two, 50 and 45, equal 95. What's the significance of 95? 95, he says, is the name of the unity of God that is going to be in the days of Mashiach. Today's days, we know that in general, God's name is Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's Tetragrammaton, Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's Gematria 26. But we know that we're always, in order to bring godliness into this world, we have to make a yichud. A yichud means a unity. a unity between two forces, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. And we do that by unifying the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the energy of the Shekhinah, which is Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. Aleph Ado, Aleph Dalet Nun Yud is the Shekhinah, which means the master. And you unify both. So 26 and Aleph Dalet Nun Yud is 65, equals 91. That's why, and that's the same gematria as the word Amen. Anytime you say Amen is 91, because by saying Amen, we are intending this unity. But that's the way it is today's days. The unity, the main primary unity, yichud, that is applicable today's days, is 91. However, at the time of the coming of Mashiach, the unity is going to be 95. Why? Because it says, when Mashiach will come, Vayeira on that day, Yiyeh Hashem Echad. The word, God's name will not be Yud Kei Vav Kei, God's name will be Yud Kei Yud Kei. So the Yud, the Vav will turn into a Yud. But the latter part of God's name is not going to be a Vav and A, it's going to be a Yud. So Yud Kei and Yud Kei together is 30, not 26. So God, Tetragrammaton will then be spelled Yud Kei, which is 30, plus 65 is 95. So when Avraham Avinu is davening, he's davening for the final unity. So that's why he picks these numbers 50 and 45, which is 95. But it's not enough. That's the yichud, it's the unity. But we also need it to manifest in a revelation, which is Hashem's kingship to be revealed. The other letters, 40, 30, 20, and 10, spell out the word Yimloch. 10 is Yud, then Mem is 40, Lamed is 30, and Chaf is 20. So Yud Kei, it's the Yichud, it's 95 plus Yimloch, which we say Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach. God is king now. Malach Hashem Yimloch, he will be king. That's referring to the future messianic times. So really what Avram is dominating over here is purely for the full revelation of Hashem Yimloch La'olam Haba. Which I believe is going to break out right now as a result of this election. I believe it's going to break out as a result of a stunning victory that is going to happen tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem, he's got it. Now, it's interesting. Since Avraham Avinu is davening for someone who externally is not the most refined, elevated human being, he's Lot. Lot is not the best of the best. Lot actually means curse in Aramaic. But he has a spark of Mashiach buried inside of it. And Avram is praying for that spark. That's what he's intending. That's when he says to God, and this is stated by both the Be'er Mayim Chaim, Rabbi Chaim of Chernovitz, a great Hasidic Rabbi, masterful orator and teacher. It's an incredible book called Be'er Mayim Chaim. It's one of the very fundamental Sifrei Chasidus, especially for beginners. And he's the one who wrote this other sefer called Sidurei Shel Shabbos. And also in the Chassam Sefer says the same idea. That when Avraham Avinu says to God, that he uses these words. He says, are you going to kill? Laham is tzaddik in Russia. You're going to kill the tzaddik with the Russia. You're going to go wipe out the tzaddik. He says, maybe there are tzaddikim in the city. Are you going to kill the tzaddik with the wicked, the righteous with the sinners? You're going to kill everybody equally? You're going to just wipe off the whole city? How can you do that? So they explain, Avraham Avinu never, God forbid, there wasn't even a thought that God was going to kill righteous people. God would never do that. They kill the righteous for no reason, together with the wicked. If Hashem is doing that, so when he's saying to kill the righteous, he's not talking about righteous that are physically manifest and alive. He says by killing the wicked, and these wicked are wicked people who contain within themselves the spark of Mashiach. That means they have that's what it means, tzaddik in Russia. The tzaddik who is together with the Russia. You're talking about one person who externally is a Russia, but internally is a tzaddik. So you're going to go kill the tzaddik with the Russia, you can't do that.
So again, this was a fight. Avram Avinu was fighting for Mashiach. He's fighting for King David. He's fighting for the Davidic kingdom, for Malchus B'tz David. That's why the prayer. That's why the insistence. So now, when we take a look at the first pasuk, it says, "Vayevoyu shnei hamalachim sedayim ba'erev," that the two angels after God, and Avram Avinu then prevailed because he doesn't save the cities, but he saves these sparks. God sends the angels to take Sodom, to take Lot and his two daughters out. It says the two malachim came to Sodom, and Lot was sitting at the entrance of Sodom. It says Lot got up and he ran towards them, bowed down to them, and he says, "Please, my masters, come into my house, wash your feet, lodge here, wash your feet." And you go. They said, no, we don't want to. We'll sleep on the street. And he begs them. He begs them. And then they turn around, and Rashi says that Vayasur means they were afraid to go directly to his house because Sodom was they were a very wicked place, and they didn't allow anybody to take in guests. So he had to circumvent and go around the that way to his house. And he made for them a mishteh. He made for them a party, a drinking meal, or whatever. Matzah is up, and he made matzah for them, and they ate. So the Be'er Chaim asks the question again. That same book I mentioned earlier, he asks the question. He says, we find that when Shimshon HaGibor meets, when the Malach comes to the father of Samson, of Shimshon, and his name is Manoach, and Manoach asks the Malach, "Please stay for us. We'll give you dinner." And the Malach says, basically, I don't eat. We don't eat. And we know that it was a very big deal that the Malachim came and they ate by Avram Avinu, because angels don't eat, but by Avram they ate. Because Avram they ate. This is actually an argument if they really ate or they pretended to eat. But even if we say that they really ate, because of Avram's food, because Avram is such a tzaddik, his food is so elevated, so even angels can eat the food of Avram Avinu. But Lot, he's not a tzaddik. You would probably have to know if you trust the kashrut in his house. And here they go and they're eating by him. Angels. So he explains that Hashem, this was all part of the master plan to save Lot. Lot needed a merit, so the malachim were going to eat by him. And what happened was, he says an interesting thing. He says Lot has within himself, as we said earlier, the spark of King David. He has within himself the spark of Mashiach. That spark was buried very deep inside him. All his life until this point, it was never activated. It lay dormant. And therefore he was extremely wicked, and he would not, because he asked the question, since when is Lot such a tzaddik suddenly, and the guests don't want to come in, and he's begging them and begging and begging, he's risking his own life. Why is he doing that? So he brings a secret from the Holy Arizal. And the Arizal says that when Esav tricked his father Yitzchak, and Yitzchak thought he was a righteous person, he really was a wicked man. So it says, the question is, how could Yitzchak have been fooled by Esav? So the pasuk says, Esav was able to fool him, because he fooled him with his mouth. He asked him, questions, and he made himself look like a tzaddik, but he was a really wicked person. But the Holy Arizal gives a deeper explanation. He says Esav was the father of great converts. Rabbi Meir comes from Esav. Unkelis Hager comes from Reuven, comes from Esav. Avadia, the prophet, the descendant of Esav. So there were very, very high souls that are buried in Esav. When Esav would come in front of Yitzchak, these sparks of holiness that were in his soul were activated because they picked up on Yitzchak. When they're buried in this dark, evil person, they're dormant, they're quiet, they can't have impact. But when they come close to a powerful Wi-Fi of holiness, a powerful projection, they're stirred. So when Esav stood in front of Yitzchak, He wasn't talking, these sparks were talking. And since these sparks were talking, Yitzchak was communicating with these sparks of holiness, and that's why he's seeing righteousness. He's sensing a holy energy, which is there in Esau. So he says the same thing happened over here. When these angels came to Lot, and especially now, since Lot needed the merit, and they're coming because they're coming for that spark, the sparks were activated. And it's for that reason that Lot is suddenly becoming the biggest, he's becoming a force of goodness. He's running, he's begging them. He's saying, please come to my house. It's not him. He's being driven by a force that's driving within him. And that's what he's doing. And that's why he explains over here, Vayiftzar, it says Vayiftzar, bum. He begged, they pestered the angels, bummed them, ma'od very much. So he says two things. First he says, like B'derech Rebbe, Vayiftzar, a pestered, and then the word bum stands for I forgot already what he says. I'm sorry for that. But he says Vayiftzar. I'll see you the second pirush. Vayiftzar, he pestered. Bumming them, but who was the one that was pestering them? Who was the one that was begging them? This wasn't Lot. This was who? Ma'od. Who is Ma'od? And this is crucial for tonight's class. I'm running out of time. I gotta go soon. But Ma'od, the word Ma'od, is the same letters as the word Adam. Now, who's Adam? Adam is Adam, first human being. But we know that Adam really is Mashiach. That's why the word Adam stands for Adam, David, Mashiach. Aleph, Dalet, Men. So Adam is Mashiach. King David. And we know that King David is deeply connected to Adam. Also, Adam, David, Mashiach. It says David doesn't have any life. The 70 years of life that he got from Adam. So David is connected to Adam, and Adam, David, Mashiach. So who was the one, Vayiftzar? Who was the one that was begging? It was Adam. Now, he doesn't say this, but the Shuah HaKadosh says this, and it's put in many places. The outside has to match the inside. Who's the outside? The outside is Lot. Inside is Adam. Is Mashiach. That's the one who's begging. And that was activated. And by the way, that's what it says, Vayasulu, they went around about, Elov to him, means they went around Lot, they went to the spark. They weren't eating in Lot's house. They were eating in the house of King David, the house of Mashiach's palace. That's why they ate. They wouldn't eat with this wicked man. They tapped in much deeper than the external. Vayasudu, they went around, Elov to him, to that spark. And that's what it also says, Vayavoyu, when they came El Beisai, to his house. Whose house? Vayavoyu El Beisai, to his house, Mashiach's house. Which house is this? This King David's house, he says. This is the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. Because what's the greatness of King David, the David HaMelech, is that he built the Beis HaMikdash. Vayavoyu El Beisai, he came to that house. And that's why Vayas Lahem Mishteh was that spark that inspired. Now, of course, it was Lot doing it, but Lot wasn't doing it because he was doing it. He was doing it because he was energized by a spark of Mashiach, by the spark of David HaMelech that was inside of him. And that's why they ate. And it's interesting, he says, that's why first they ate at Avram's house, and now they ate at Lot. He says, Avram, we know, is a chariot. It says, God, there are 4 legs of the divine chariot. We might say 4 wheels. Avram is one. Yitzchak is the second, Yaakov is the third, and who's the fourth? King David. So first they ate at Avram's house, who was the first leg of the chariot, and then they ate at David HaMelech's palace. In Lot, it wasn't Lot, it was David HaMelech, it was the Pneumius. But watch this. The Chitzonius, the external, has to match the Pneumius, has to match the inside. So if the inside is Adam, Aleph Dalet Men, the word Ma'od, that's the spark. Adam, David, Mashiach. Aleph Dalet Men is Gematria 45. Aleph Dalet Men is 40. Lot, let's see, Lamed is 30, plus Vav is 36, plus 9, 45. Lot is Gematria 45. So it says, in Kabbalah it says, and Arizal says, Lot is the backside of King of Adam. He's the hindsight of him. And that's why he carries within him the spark of Mashiach. That's the ultimate Adam. He's like the shell of it. So this is, I think, a very big secret. Connecting it to what's happening, just brief, I believe that the current president, Donald Trump, is a messianic figure and a messianic force in the world, and I don't believe consciously. Again, I'm not getting in what his motivations are, but he's been an instrument of Mashiach Tzidkenu. There is a powerful force of Mashiach that's operating through this human being. And he is president number 45. We've discussed earlier in earlier classes how it seems like, there are those who compare him to Koresh, Cyrus. Those who compare, and in many classes we discussed, he exhibits all the features of Esau, who is also going to do tshuva and join Yaakov for the redemption. Tonight, I want to suggest, because the elections are coming out tomorrow, that perhaps there is some elements of Lot to him. And here's a really cool thing. Talk about everything being hinted to the Torah. So someone sends me an email yesterday. Hashem say it helps, because I was mystified the connection. Someone sends me an email. I'm sorry, I can't give credit to the person because I don't remember his name. Someone sent me. I don't remember the one who sent me the email. I don't know him. He just sent me an email. And over there it says that he says like this. In Rashi, it says that the two kings came to Sodom, and Lot was sitting at the entrance of Sodom. Yoshev, he sits. So it should say Yashav, he was sitting. Yoshev means he's currently sitting. So Rashi makes an interesting statement. It's the first pasuk of tomorrow's Chumash. Talk about a hint to the election. V'loit Yoshev b'shas doim Yashav ksiv. We read it Yoshev, he's been sitting, but Yashav implies that he just sat down. The Lord Yashav, why? He says, why is he sitting there? Because that day, Lot was appointed to be the judge. This was election day. In Sodom, it was election day. And Lot won the elections, and he was appointed. So he told me, this person said, that the word Villot and Lot is Gematria Edom, Aleph, Dalet, Vav, Mem. Gematria, what did I say? 51. Edom, 51. And he said, no, it is a sign for election. And it seems to be saying that that day he was elected, Edom means red, that there will be a huge red victory tomorrow. That was when he sent me a sign that there will be a victory for the red. The Republicans will win. And I sent it back, and I said, but Lot himself, take away the Villot, just the name Lot is Gematria 45. And this president is the 45th president. If Biden wins, he's going to be president number 46. But 45 is this president. The Lot Yoshav and Lot was elected. 45 was elected for what? For a second term. But it fits very good with what I'm saying. It doesn't make a difference whether one is excited or not excited about the finesse of the president, about his mannerisms and all that. That's not the issue over here. I don't even believe that there's any, we know especially by kings, it says that God, they're in Hashem's hands. In him, it's like what Hashem saw through this individual in terms of furthering the redemption for the Jewish people is stunning, and we haven't seen anything yet compared to what is coming in the next 4 years. If there's anybody that needs to completely shift the entire world and has the ability to do so towards Mashiach Tzidkenu, he's the man. V'loit Yashav, 45, sits, Oiseh Hayoim, that day. That's incredible. Now, going on in Los Angeles? If you walk down the streets here, and you can go through many other streets, not just over here in the neighborhood, but in all cities across the United States, especially places like Los Angeles, New York, places that perhaps we will say there will be many people that will not be so happy if Donald Trump pulls off a victory tomorrow. All the stores are boarded up. Literally, go to the grocery stores here, go to the thing. I just went and I bought a suit today. The places are boarded up. That just shows how crazy society we have today. People are going to get upset. They have the right. They're angry. You have to let people let their anger out. It's so ridiculous. Talk about Sodom and Amorah. And what kind of behavior is this? Imagine it would have been the other way around. God forbid. Imagine if it would be right-wing. That would walk through the street and would bang, smash doors and break. I think it would be very different. But for whatever reason, it gets a pass. You have to deal with it. I'm sorry, people. Hashem should protect us all. Hashem should send the malachim to protect. Will there be a day of rage? God should protect us all. A day of rage? A week of rage? Who knows? I don't even know. But in any case, what does it say in the Parsha? That all the people ganged up on the house. Again. And what does it say? Vayikshu, and they approached. They're going to break the door. They smash the door. Take a look. What's going on? They're going to smash in Walmart, smash in this, all the stores. Well, some really fancy stores as well. But what does it say? It says, Va'anshe ha'ir, I'm telling you what it says in Sfar. Va'anshe ha'ir, the people of the city. Va'anshe Sodom, the people of Sodom. Nosabu al habayis. They surrounded the house. Habayis, the house. So, again, I'm not sure exactly who it is, but one of the earlier ones, he says what really they were ganging up. And it says that everybody came mikatze from the whole city, mikatze from the end. What does that mean? They subconsciously were now ready to fight because they sensed Mashiach's being an extraction. They sensed King David's soul. These were wicked people, so they wanted to snuff it out. So they surrounded the house. The house means King David's house. Because David HaMelech is there. And that King David's house doesn't mean King David's private residence. It means the big Hamikdash. They were fighting the third temple. They were screaming two-state solution. They were going to fight, bring back the Palestinian whatever. This is what it is. It's just different forms. It's the same idea. They're fighting the house. They're fighting the big city. They're fighting King David. That's what it says, mikatz. And katz is the same word, haketz. 195, as we said earlier. The end. They're fighting against the end. And that's why Lishbar, they want to break Deles. The door, they want to break King David. David is called the door, as he says, Aramimcha Hashem. I exalt you, God, Delisani, because you lifted me up. And the word Delisani is the word Deles. King David is the door. That's why when Shlomo HaMelech wanted to bring the Aram, Holy Ark, into the Beis HaMikdash, it wouldn't open up until he mentioned Ba'avur David Avdecha, for the sake of King David, your servant, Al Tashit Pnei Meshecha, don't turn us away. And that's when the door is flung open. King David is called the door of holiness. So they wanted to break the doors, they wanted to break Mashiach. So this terrible fight that's going on right now, imagine if that taking place 4,000 years ago when we're so far from Mashiach, they were already fighting to break the door and break the Beis Hamikdash. Could you imagine the Sultan stands at the last seconds, he's breathing his last and it's about to happen, they're going to go nuts! And this is the fight that's happening right now. Lishboy Desadelas to break the door. But here's the cool part. In the end, the Malachim don't let them harm. The Malachim rescue 45. They rescue Lot. And they extract them. They pull him out, him and his two daughters. Now, the merit that Lot was redeemed was in the merit of Mashiach. Now, we had this already a long discussion, the significance of the number 45. It means Adam, but 45 is the number of Tikkun, the power of Tikkun. The whole power of Torah and mitzvahs of the Jewish people is the number of 45. That's why I believe that President 45, this is the complete level of tikkun, which we completed a tikkun in this world. Esav, after he's fixed, is 45. So what do you have this weekend? Because the one question I had if Trump was going to survive into the next, and even another term, was, the question is, maybe he finished his job already. Maybe he's done already. And whatever he needed to do, he did already. And now, again, my prayer is Mashiach should come even before we start, before we actually go into election day. Let Mashiach literally come. We don't need any of this anymore. And I wish for that. But as it seems like it's going, if it still has to go through a process, he seems to be the one that's facilitating this messianic process. But does 45 need to get another term? Does he need 8 years, or 4 years was enough? What does it say when they took Lot? One of the beautiful words, because when we read it, we say, Shalsheles. Shalsheles is one of the tropes where you go, it's like, oh, which word is it? I'm not a Balkore, so don't learn the Shalsheles from me. What does it say? Vayismama, and he delayed. Vayachziku anashim biyadei, and they grabbed him. But the word is vayismama. The word mama is vayis ma memhei 2 times 45. And the word on it is a shalsheles, because shalsheles, it says as far, I'm not saying my own thing, it says it's the merit that he had is the 2 45s. One is Avram Avinu and one is David HaMelech, both 45. Which, by the way, 45 and 45 is 90, which 90 is Mashiach, Tzemach. But here it's 45 and 45. And Vayismama, and Shalsheles is referring to, Shalsheles also means a chain. And that it refers to a chain of offspring. This is referring to the offspring of the Davidic kingdom, that's the Shalsheles. So the Shalsheles, and which means that sometimes you have an individual whose being is just, he's facilitating the Malchus of Beis David. It's not his own thing. And it's interesting how the word, again, this is my own thought. Again, I saw in a sefer that Ma is 2 times 45. But as it applies now, is that on this day, it seems like, may Hashem help, he's going to be given a second 45. He's going to be given his second chance. And hopefully now, may God help that he's going to complete what needs to be completed. So I would wish I could stay a little longer and continue in exploring this and sharing some other ideas over here. But I think I've covered most of what I wanted to say. The main thing is that we have to realize that we're living in fantastic times. And what we're seeing now is just incredible biblical prophecy playing out. And the Geula is tomorrow's Chumash is the extraction of Mashiach, the revelation of Mashiach. Even if it's, again, to be found not in the how would we even expect it? We've already mentioned that Donald Trump is Gematria Mashiach ben David. Doesn't mean God forbid that he's Mashiach. Not in a million years. But it does mean that he has somehow a hand in this messianic process. So may God bless him with another, that 45 gets another 45. Add those 2 45s together, you get Tzaddik. May that add up to Tzemach Tzamachti, the coming of Mashiach, the full and complete coming of Mashiach. And may that be taken from the Yad Mamish. May that be now. And straight from here to Yerushalayim, to the third temple. Everyone be well.